Hello, my name is Elaine Slatter, and I'm the podcast host of the Fabulous Fempreneurship Show. In this special series, we're interviewing the authors of an exciting new book, 8 Qualities of Great Leadership, the critical elements for now and future success, to get their in-depth thoughts on the chapter that they've written. So today's guest is Carrie Wicklow, COO of Actualized Consulting, an author on a very important chapter on intentional leadership. So welcome to our show, Carrie.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I know you've been on our podcast before, so I'm very excited to talk to you again today. So before we get started, could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself in terms of your background and education and experience?
Sure. So I have my undergrad in marketing and finance, a double major with a minor in psychology. I've always liked to do a little bit of everything. And then I have my MBA in information technology. I started out in consulting at Accenture, and I've pretty much been in consulting my entire life. And now I'm the chief operating officer of a consulting company. But all of the different degrees and all my different education and experience really helps me, be able to wear a lot of different hats as the chief operating officer.
Yes, there's nothing to replace that experience that you've had along the way. That's for sure. So in your chapter in the book, 8 Qualities of Great Leadership, you focus on intentional leadership. And today we'd like to explore with you what that means and, the importance of giving, receiving of gratitude and appreciation. So could you sort of explain that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think, if you're being an intentional leader and really showing up for your people and your teams, making sure that you're appreciating what your teams are doing, being grateful is just extremely important. And if you look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's that you want to feel a part of a team. So if you're able to have that feeling, and when I'm talking to my team members, most times when I'm like, what motivates you? A lot of times it's just that recognition that, that you're being seen as a person, right? Versus just a part of the team, you're just doing your work, but, really feeling like you're making a difference is really important.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So what would you say is the number one mistake that leaders make if they don't understand that whole concept of intentional leadership?
I think they get busy. I think leaders, you're busy, right? If you're managing an organization, managing a team, a huge project, or whatever you're managing, you get busy. You get into the minutia, the day-to-day tasks, what needs to get done. And you're just focused on those end results versus, okay, my team's working really hard to make us successful. So I think they forget to give that recognition, which the great news about this gratitude and appreciation, it's completely free. So it's not like I'm saying, give them like, another, big raise or big bonus or anything like that. It's just, I think we get busy, and it's not like intentional that you're forgetting, but we get busy. So it's always like reminding yourself, when there is a busy time, or maybe, like I recently had a team member who's a key team member out, and she usually feels like she can't, go out of the office without, but we were able to cover. And so the 2 people that were covering for her, I made sure to recognize the work. And I mean, literally they were almost able to handle everything while she was out. There was like maybe 2 or 3 things that were outstanding, which I was like, wow, you guys did an amazing job covering for this individual. And then she was able to be out of the office. So she appreciated it too. So it's just that small gesture meant the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the people that we're covering also have their own sort of section to take care of. So they're doing more than their own job. They're doing a job and a half, probably, each one of
Right.
them. And so, you know, that's above and beyond. So you're absolutely right. It's definitely time to take the time to appreciate and be grateful for what they have done. And you're right. And the person that was out just felt that relief that they could be out and they weren't sort of dropping the ball on whatever the project they were working on. So
Exactly. And
yeah,
now she'll feel more
absolutely.
comfortable to take time off in the future as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
Knowing she can
yeah,
trust the team.
yeah. It
Yeah.
builds trust within the group as well. Yeah. So what happens if a leader doesn't pay any attention to that?
I think many times, people think, oh, well, that's just their job. Like they need to step up. I think it might not do anything in the moment, but it'll kind of start to build up. And maybe that individual won't feel seen. And, they're like, wait a minute, I really stepped up and nobody said anything. So I
Mhm.
feel like it can be like it happens once, then perhaps it happens another time. And then by the third time, you start to get resentful. You're like,
Yeah.
why am I going to put in this extra effort? Nobody noticed. Nobody said thank you. Why bother?
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So it can absolutely backfire on the leader. And it might
Mhm.
not be intentional for the leader, right?
No,
Maybe
because
they
you get
just,
busy. Yeah,
yeah,
you just want it done.
yeah, you just want to get it done. So you think, oh, these two people could do it. I'll toss it over to them without thinking of the ramifications to those two people and the team as a whole. Yeah, you're right. So I think leaders have to step back, don't you think, and understand what intentional leadership is. They have to do their own work to realize
Yeah.
how good they are at this or how they're not very good at that.
Exactly,
And have a
exactly.
plan, right, to fix it. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you also talk about empowering teams, and I know you've got a big team all over the place, and I've been in a similar situation where, you know, I've had teams all over the world, and you've got to empower them, but not micromanage them. So would you say that's one of the most um, often leaders do, the micromanaging without trusting and empowering?
Yeah, I'm actually doing a talk later today on empowering your people. And I think that, as I continue to be more tenured in my career, people want to feel empowered too. And that micromanaging, it's almost like telling the person you don't trust.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's hard. I mean, believe me, it's something that I continue to have to. And I think it goes back to when you're saying just taking a pause before you're, maybe asking for information or giving your input and really saying, okay, can I trust my team? And if you can't trust your team, now that's another whole story, right? But if you have the good people in place and you really do trust them, then empowering them to do their jobs and trusting that they will. And, making sure that you have a communication mechanism in place so you're up to speed on things and, hey, I really do want to provide input in this area. Right. So the team knows where you want to give input and where they have the leeway to do their job.
Yeah, to just go ahead and they don't need any permission or any feedback from you as a leader. Do you
Mhm.
think that sometimes leaders are micromanaging because they haven't trained their team properly to take charge?
Absolutely. And I've seen that even personally where like and it goes back to that self-reflection, right?
Mhm.
Why do I not trust this person?
Mhm.
Right. And many times it's like, I haven't given them the tools
Right.
do their job, A, or B, maybe that's not a good fit. This task, this project, maybe it's not a good fit for them. So I'm really big on, you can't push people to be a certain way and have a certain skill set, right?
Yeah, you're
You
absolutely right
so
there.
yeah, you have to really focus on what are their strengths, where are they shining, what inspires them, and focusing on those tasks. And then if you're looking at your team, how do you divide that out? So one person, this is what they're good at, this is what another person is good at. So I think I've either A, not trained them or given them the tools, or B, it might just not be in their skill set.
Yeah, and do you think sometimes the team members might not be confident in telling the leader that they don't have the skill set, or this isn't in their wheelhouse? Maybe there's a little bit of fear in there if there isn't a very good open communication.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, I personally wouldn't want to say I can't do something,
Right, but
if
you
I'm
might you can sort of give the feedback, I'd like to do this, but I don't have training in this area or
right.
that area. And then the leader that might be a big surprise, you know. And
Yeah.
but if there isn't that two-way communication, right, then there's a lot of assumptions that can happen, and that doesn't usually turn out well.
No, never assume. Never assume. And, that's why we also, one of the things that we're doing when we do our goal setting at the beginning of the year and then your performance evaluations, it's really the majority of our form is around your own personal self reflection. So you can say what's challenging you, what
Yeah.
is, what do you really like to work on? So then your supervisor can see, okay, this is what I need to focus on with this individual. So that's been really huge for us as an organization. And I think as an intentional leader, what are the questions? And, maybe you don't have the power to change how you're doing those, goal setting, but you can ask questions when you're on your one-on-ones with your people, like what's challenging you right now? What can I help you with? Right.
Yeah, I think this is a totally different kind of leadership than we had, say, 20 years ago, where it was
Mhm. Mhm.
very much a top-down leadership where you kind of were given the task and you're expected to do it. But I love this 360 so that there's just as much input from the members of the team as there is from the leader. And I think, would you say that's one of the big things about intentional leadership, that it's changed the dynamic between the leader and the team members?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it needs to be, like you said, the 360 where, because if your team member or like me personally, if I'm feeling inspired by what I'm
Hmm.
doing, I'm going to give a lot more effort
Absolutely.
than if I really don't like what I'm doing. And it doesn't mean clearly there's things that people don't like to do, right? But it has to be a balance of things that
Yeah,
really light you up,
exactly.
right? There's a balance.
Hmm.
And I think it's how do we find that balance?
Yeah. What other mistakes do you find that leaders make today in today's world?
Um, if you go back to, being intentional, telling people why they're what the why behind it. I'll give an example. Just yesterday, somebody on my team hadn't been keeping me in the loop on a certain area of the business. And going back to me not wanting to micromanage, and so I wanted to be like, hey, so I just said, this is why I need this information. Right.
Mhm.
Versus why didn't you,
Why didn't you?
why didn't you give it to me? And then go down this like negative path. So I really was intentional, like, hey, this is why I need it. This is what happened because I didn't have it. It made me look kind of stupid, honestly. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I need to just like, and I'm like, it's not a big deal. Just copy me on an email and it'll be in my head. I'm not asking for anything huge. Right. So I think telling people why maybe
Yeah.
something did you weren't pleased with what happened, or hey, I need you to work some extra hours, this is why, or hey, I'm grateful for you because, like, in going back to my initial example, because you really allow this person to be out of the office. So at that why, and I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek and,
Yeah.
that power of why. And it is such a simple thing. I'm really big on simple like things to
Yeah.
remember and tell people why. It's that easy.
Yeah, because that team member probably didn't know the ramifications of not telling you what was happening, right? Because they maybe don't know what's down the road or who you were working with or who you needed to update and what, as you say, why it was so important.
Right.
So yeah, communication's a big thing in leadership. It's good and bad. You have to communicate both the
Right.
good
And
and the
there's a
bad.
way to,
Mhm.
going back to one of my big things is like pausing to pivot to a positive and,
Yeah.
or the lesson learned. So this is,
Hmm.
when you're giving people feedback, it can be very positive.
Yeah.
Like, here's
Yeah.
our lesson. This is why we need to do it this way. What did
Yeah.
we learn from this situation? And it feels better as a leader to have that conversation
Yeah.
versus coming down on somebody because nobody's trying not to do a good job. Everybody's trying to do their
Yeah.
best,
Yeah.
right?
But some team members see a big picture
Hmm.
and can put it all together knowing that, intuitively that you need this because of,
Sure,
right?
sure, sure.
And
Yeah.
some team members may not know that picture, may not quite have that same understanding. Maybe they've only worked for the company in a short while and they don't get the big picture
Hmm.
yet.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, that's why I think what you wrote about intentional leadership, because if you're leading the right way and you're not making huge mistakes, then everybody's going to respond to your leadership, right? Because they know exactly where you are and
Hmm.
what your company stands for, what your vision is for the company. And therefore, it's easier for them to fit in. So if you keep it all close up to yourself, I think perhaps you could say that that's one of the big mistakes, like not being open and not being
Correct.
clear
Hmm.
and not, as you say, not telling people the why of why it's important or why you're doing it or why the vision changes or why that you need to pivot as a company. There's always a why, right?
There's always a why. There is. There
Yeah.
is. And if there's not a why, then don't ask,
Yeah.
it's a good check for you too, right? As a leader.
Yes, exactly. So you've had a huge experience leading your company and exploring new ideas, and you're excited about using Google Jamboard. So could you tell us a little bit about Google Jamboards and why you're so excited about using them?
Sure. Yeah, we use Gmail as as a corporate tool, and we try to keep everything. So like when you're in your email, like Google has the Google Meet, and then I noticed they had the Jamboard, which allows you to put pictures and you can have a whole team. So we do gratitude Jamboards. Where like I personally do that with my internal team like weekly so we can see pictures. So we usually are saying what we're grateful for our team, maybe somebody in our family or our friends, and then why we're grateful for ourselves, right? And then when. So sharing that with your immediate team is great. So I do that with my team, but then as a corporate, we did that leading up to our last retreat and just gratitude for people. And it was like we started one page and it ended up being like 15 pages of pictures and just so much appreciation and gratitude for the team members. It warms your heart, right? And it's very it kind of is like a domino effect, right? Like people just it's contagious. You're like, oh, wait, that person's great. Oh, I'm grateful for this person. And like it just is like bing, 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 bing. And it's just a beautiful thing. And again, it's something that you can do to, and there's tons of other tools out there, but I just try to be smart and use tools that we already have within our organization. But how can you as a leader use something similar that you can share pictures, you can share words of appreciation with either your immediate team or even at a company level, and it's contagious and it's feel good. Everybody feels good.
Well, I think the one thing I got from that is that it becomes very personal, right? Like
Mm.
if you say I'm really grateful for Janet, for example, doing this for me this week. You have no idea I was having a horrible week and this saved my day or whatever it was. You think of Janet now as like a wonderful giving person, and you think of the person that received the gratitude as being extremely appreciative. And so it kind of humanizes what they did. Would you say
Absolutely.
that's one of the biggest advantages of the Jamboard?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think like having this visual of, all in one place, it's just really, it puts a big personal touch on it. Even at the retreat, I ended up printing them all out to put
Hmm.
out on display just to, kind of keep it going. Yeah, it's just, we all are grateful. And it's one of those things where, if you are having a bad day, you can always find something you're grateful for or
Yeah,
some.
exactly. And actually going on the Jamboard is a great idea. If you're having a down day, go on the Jamboard
Yeah, exactly. And
and
yes,
check out what other people are grateful for. And you think, yeah, I should be grateful for
I
that.
should exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going back to that pivoting, right? You can pivot to
Yeah.
gratitude.
So in summing up, what would you say the most important things are for intentional leadership?
I think, really, you know, being and it's the word intention, setting intentions for your team, so they do know the why, kind of recapping what we were talking about earlier. That whole self-awareness as a leader, how are you showing up? Are you micromanaging? Are you kind of barking orders at people? Can you just take a moment to pause and take the time to say, okay, this is why I need you to do this. Or if you're giving feedback, this is why, could you think about doing it this way? Right. So there's this big thing on self awareness. And, I've found that when I also own my mistakes as a leader, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
not perfect, right? Like
No.
I don't want anybody to think that, anybody's perfect. But then, as a leader, also owning if I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take accountability because I also caused this problem, right?
Yeah.
This was
Yeah.
my role, and this is what I could do differently. And this is, what do you think you could do differently? So I think it's just this, being intentional, being positive on let's move forward. We don't need to spend all this time here. How do we move everything forward as an organization and as a team? Because we all, we spend so much time at work. We want to have some fun with it, do a good job, and make sure that, we all are aligned on what we're doing together.
So if things go pear-shaped, when things just go down the hopper, right? And it's just not, maybe a client it didn't turn out well, the working with a particular client or whatever. How should a leader handle that part? When things are going pear-shaped, what should they do?
Yeah, I think, and believe me, I'm in consulting, so this happens. And the thing is like every client, every person is different. So there's not like this one size fits all. However, understanding what happened, like getting all your facts on what happened and, what could we be doing better to move it forward? Because I think a mistake, going back to mistakes, is that sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about what went wrong and the why it went wrong versus like, okay, it went wrong. Like, do we really need to spend the time stewing over that? It wastes time. So if we just say, okay, this is what happened, identify what happened more from a factual place, keeping the emotion out of it, and then okay, this is what we can do better. And like as many times when we're having a client issue, it can be partially on the client, partially with us, but just identifying, listen, this is how we all can do better to move it forward. Because at the end of the day, we want this project to be successful. We
Yeah.
all want it to be successful. And
Yeah.
I think going back to that, we all want to be successful. We all want things to be going smoothly. So how can we move it forward? And I just think that's, for me personally, that saves a ton of time.
Yeah.
And it's more positive. People feel better about it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, to do the analytics on it, as you say, in an unemotional way, so that you know, sometimes the client and the consulting relationship, maybe it's just not the right fit. So don't go after those kind of clients if that's not the right fit, that kind of thing. So the analysis helps with that, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes and take on, say, something that isn't a good fit for you or the client, right? And it's acknowledging that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why that intentional leadership, I think, is so important, because if you have to do the work on that as the leader, right?
You do. And
Yeah, because
sometimes, you have to be okay to say, okay, maybe this wasn't the best decision.
Exactly.
And that's
Exactly.
okay. And that makes us human, going back to the
Yeah.
humanizing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think in the old days, like going back 10, 15 years ago, people were afraid of mistakes, but I really don't think there is a mistake. It's just
No.
that you've just got to analyze the things that didn't work out and then find a new route to fix it, right?
Exactly.
And I think you just got to look at business with a different set of through a different lens than you did 10 or 15 years ago. And I think communication and intentional leadership is right at the top of that, understanding the new way of doing business. Because I don't know about you, but since the pandemic, teams are not physically together as much as they were before. Either they're not ever going to get back together physically in an office in one space, and that changes the dynamic of the workplace and the dynamic as you as the leader, right? How you take care of your team.
So it's even more important that you are being intentional and that you are seeing each person for who they are.
Yeah. So before we close out here, do you have any other tips for our listeners if they're new in the leadership area?
I'd say look at your team and try to see what's working well, and where can you make it the best team ever. And we use that a lot, like our best team, and have people focusing on what lights them up. And there's a nice balance. You have to find balance with each one of your people to make sure that they're getting enough to challenge them, inspire them, and then a little bit of the not so fun stuff. So where's that sweet spot?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Carrie, for being such a great guest today. Where can people find Actualize Consulting?
Yeah, we have our website, actualizeconsulting.com, and then we're on LinkedIn at Actualize, and then I'm on LinkedIn as Carrie Weckelo.
Well, great. So if any of our listeners have questions on intentional leadership, they can always connect with you on LinkedIn then.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you once again. That was a lot of fun. And I'm Elaine Slaughter, host of the Fabulous Fempreneurship Podcast. And check out this brand new book, 8 Qualities of Great Leadership. And Carrie's chapter on intentional leadership is a very important one to read. So thank you once again, Carrie.